Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. As a professor of cognitive development, honestly, there is literally nothing that fascinates me more than the almost magical ways a child's brain processes language. Because think about it, teaching a kid to read words on a page, that's one thing. But teaching them to truly comprehend it, to really engage with the text, and most importantly, to regulate their own understanding, especially when they're learning a second language, wow, that is the holy grail of education. So today, we're going to unlock exactly how that happens. We'll be peeking under the hood at those hidden mental gears that turn when a young student reads, and even better, how we can actually teach students to control those gears themselves. Here's a quick look at our visual syllabus for today. First, the reading comprehension puzzle. Then, the manager of the mind. Third, the grade 3 experiment. Fourth, analyzing the data leaps. And finally, number 5, the power of the think aloud. Let's get right into it. Section 1, the reading comprehension puzzle, demystifying the process. So let's set the stage for why this is just so absolutely crucial. Reading comprehension in a second language, it's a universal struggle. We see it all the time where students just decode the words phonetically, right? But they aren't actually grasping the meaning behind them. So to really explore this, we're going to anchor our explainer today on a really fascinating piece of research. It's a 2016 experimental study by Farheen Mahmood and her colleagues, and it looks at ESL, English as a second language, reading comprehension among children in Pakistan. And what makes this study such a real game changer is that it doesn't just ask, hey, can these kids read? No, it tests what actually happens when we explicitly teach them how to think while they're reading. Moving on to Section 2, the manager of the mind, defining our terms. Okay, let's dive into this, because before we can really appreciate the experiment, we kind of need to clear up some of this academic jargon. In cognitive psychology, we toss around the terms cognitive and metacognitive strategies a lot, and yeah, the line between them can feel a bit blurry. But let's just use a super simple analogy, okay? The worker and the manager. Cognitive strategies, those are your worker. That's the actual mental elbow grease required to do a specific task. Like if you're looking up a word in a dictionary or trying to sound out a really tough syllable, that's your cognitive worker on the clock. Metacognitive strategies, on the other hand, are the manager. This is your brain literally stepping back, checking in, and monitoring how that worker is doing. The manager is the voice asking, wait, did I actually understand that paragraph I just read? Do I need to loop back and read it again? To ground this a bit more formally, we can look back to the foundational work of John Flavel in 1979. He's the guy who essentially coined the term. He defined metacognition quite simply as thinking about thinking. It's your conscious awareness of your own thinking progression. And this is the magic part. When we empower a child with these metacognitive skills, we aren't just teaching them English. We're literally handing them the keys to self-regulated learning. We're teaching them how to be their own teacher. How cool is that? All right, Section 3, the grade 3 experiment, into the laboratory. So how do we actually go about testing these, invisible mental processes in a real-world classroom? Well, the researchers set up a really elegant, highly structured methodology. First, they selected grade 3 ESL students. So these are kids right around 8 or 9 years old from schools in the Punjab province. Step 2, they ran a pre-test to gauge their regular English reading skills, basically setting a baseline to see exactly where the kids were currently struggling. Then came the really fun part, the intervention. Teachers applied specific, targeted cognitive and metacognitive approaches during their reading sessions. And finally, step 4, a post-test to monitor the exact shifts in their performance. But what exactly was that intervention? Well, drawing on a ton of literature, the teachers equipped these 8-year-olds with 7 very specific tools. We've got vocabulary building, making connections, questioning, summarizing, predicting, visualizing, and monitoring. And look at those verbs. Notice how active they are? The teachers didn't just tell the kids, hey, read this carefully. No, they taught them to explicitly hit pause and visualize the story in their heads, to predict what was going to happen on the very next page, and to actively monitor themselves if they felt their focus slipping. Okay, Section 4, analyzing the data leaps, the aha moments. Now, what's really interesting about this next bit is the sheer scale of the change we see. Seriously, what happens when an 8-year-old is actually taught to manage their own mind? Let's look at their summarizing skills. Before the intervention in the pretest, 0% of the students could summarize the content in their own words, literally 0, and a massive 43% simply could not summarize the passage at all. I mean, they read the words, sure, but the meaning completely vanished. But now, look at the post-test. After being taught these metacognitive strategies, the ability to summarize in their own words jumped to 23%. And even more staggeringly, that complete inability to summarize, it dropped radically from 43% down to just 7%. I mean, that is a profound cognitive leap for such a short period of time. And we see a similarly dramatic shift when it comes to questioning skills. So this measures whether the students could respond to questions asked at the start, middle, and end of a reading session. In the pre-test, only 23% of students could do this effectively. But following the metacognitive instruction, that number more than doubled to 47%. They weren't just passively soaking up text anymore. They were actively interacting with it. They were querying it and holding on to the context. It's just fantastic. And this brilliantly illustrates what is arguably the most striking piece of data from the entire study: a 50% difference. That is the massive improvement recorded in students successfully recalling existing knowledge to make connections with the text they were reading. Just think about that for a second. Half the class suddenly unlocked this ability to bridge the gap between their own lived experiences and the foreign English words on the page. In the world of cognitive development, we know for a fact that learning happens when new information attaches to old information. So this 50% leap, it proves these strategies were actively building those neural bridges. Section 5. Power of the Think Aloud, Direct Application. So how do we take all of this amazing data and actually use it in a classroom tomorrow? Well, to get these kinds of results, one of the single most powerful tools a teacher can use is the Think Aloud strategy. It was originally developed by Newell and Simon, but I absolutely love this framing by Rosenshine and Meister from 1992. They describe it as a scaffolding device that articulate readers apply in their peers to model their understanding. Because remember, metacognition, that thinking about thinking, it's totally invisible. You can't just look at a student and see them making a mental connection, right? So as a teacher, you have to make your own invisible thoughts visible to your students. You literally have to model out loud the exact internal pattern that you want them to adopt. So, here is your quick, actionable toolkit for executing a Think Aloud. When you're reading a text to your students, don't just read the words perfectly and fluently. Stop, pause, model your internal thinking out loud. Say something like, I don't actually recognize this word. I'm going to look at this sentence around it to see if I can guess what it means. Question the content out loud. Wow, I wonder why the character just did that. You can even catch yourself making a mistake in real time, like, wait, actually, scratch that. I thought they were at home, but it says the school bell rang. Let me reread that part. By doing this, you are explicitly summarizing and clarifying the material. And you're showing your students the exact blueprint of what a successful mind manager looks like at work. So, we've seen the data, we've defined the terms, we've even looked at the direct practical application, which leaves us with this one final thought. If explicitly teaching thinking about thinking can fundamentally transform an 8-year-old ESL student's reading comprehension in the span of just one single experimental study, how are we equipping the rest of our students' minds? Are we just handing them books and hoping for the best, or are we actively giving them the cognitive management tools to truly unlock them? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today, and hey, keep thinking about thinking.